Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Hannah Scott. I am the program director in the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences Center for Cooperatives at Ohio State, which is a long way of saying that I work with cooperatives and cooperative programming. This is my standard reminder that we are here to start a conversation, right? We're here to plant a seed. We're not going to be able to get to every single thing about the cooperative model applied to farmers markets today. We wish we could, but we just don't have enough time. So really our goal today is to start that conversation and then encourage you to follow up with questions or to find additional resources. We're also going to share some of those resources in the chat. Of course, like any program we do, we're not here to give financial or legal advice. If you have questions that are specific to your circumstances, you should chat with competent advisors in those areas. I'm going to just kick things off with a quick couple of definitions around what a cooperative is and the cooperative business model. And then I'm going to turn things over to our guests, who of course can answer all of these questions as well and talk much more about the cooperative model too. So just as a baseline, cooperatives are mutually owned, democratically controlled businesses, and they're based in a global set of principles that are based in values of self-help and equity and various other principles. Members generally are users of the enterprise. That looks different in every cooperative. If you've seen one co-op, you've seen one co-op. They're all a little bit different, so that's why we're excited to talk with Mandy today about how her community applies the cooperative model. Of course, members of the cooperative are the owners of the business. They're the equity holders of the business, and they share their control in that enterprise democratically. If there are profits and if the cooperative is set up to do profit distribution, as we sometimes call it in the cooperative community, then that profit is shared in proportion to use of the enterprise, whether that's the amount marketed through the enterprise or perhaps supplies purchased or however the cooperative sets up that use relationship, which, as I said, can be variable. Sometimes there's a little bit of confusion. This is a slide actually from one of my colleagues who is she's a cooperative attorney. I thought this was a really helpful way of thinking about this because sometimes folks are thinking about cooperatives as a legal entity. It's a cooperative entity. Sometimes folks are thinking about operating a business in some other form, but they apply cooperative principles to it. So maybe it's a legal structure, right, with cooperative principles mapped on top of it. That's another way that folks think about cooperatives. Sometimes when folks are talking about cooperatives, they're talking about a tax category. I know sometimes many of us would not get excited about that, but if you're a tax nerd out there and you want to think specifically about taxes, you could be thinking about the category of taxation that applies to cooperatives, generally speaking, but there are many. In practice, a cooperative is almost always a set of practices, values, and principles, right? So it connects back to those cooperative principles that are shared across the globe and are kind of fostered by the International Cooperative Alliance. So I just share this as one way of us approaching the cooperative conversation to point out that we might be approaching it from a lot of different perspectives, and all of those are valid. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague and friend, Christie Welch. Christie is a program specialist with OSU. She's based at the Ohio State University South Centers, and she works with the Direct Food and Agricultural Marketing Program. I'm going to let Christie introduce herself further and share a little bit more about her program, and then I'm going to stop talking and let her do the talking along with Mandy. Thanks so much for being here, Christie.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for joining us today. I lead the Direct Food and Agricultural Marketing Program through Ohio State University Extension. And really the goal of our program is to make our local food producers and farmers be more sustainable, which includes financially sustainable. And we usually do that through more effective marketing for those businesses that we work with. And so not only do we work with farmers markets, but we work with farm markets and agritourism enterprises and farm to school. And so it's a pretty broad audience. One of my first loves is farmers markets, and I will share my involvement with those here in just a minute. But again, leading that program, we touch with a lot of different local food producers here in Ohio.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Christy. And I want to say a big thank you so much to Mandy Way for joining us today, taking a break from the heat and the market stand to talk to us about her experience. Mandy is a current manager and actually formerly the board president of the Chillicothe Farmers Market Association, which is based in Ross County, Ohio. We're going to talk much more about the Chillicothe Farmers Market Association, and Mandy's going to share some of that. But thank you, Mandy, so much for being here as we get started. Yeah. Okay, Christy, I'm going to turn it to you.
All right, Hannah, thank you very much. And Hannah mentioned the Chillicothe Farmers Market Association, and so that's where my wearing multiple hats come in. My husband and I are farmers, and we have done a lot of different things over the years, mainly small fruits. And so when the farmers market was kind of getting re-energized in Chillicothe, which is my actual hometown, that's where I live, we got involved to help grow our business as well as help support the market there in our local community. And so over the course of a number of years, I served on the board as the secretary, the vice president, and the president, and then just as a member. And so it's been great to see the farmers market grow over the last couple of decades. And unfortunately, I'm no longer a vendor or a member of the farmers market. And still supportive, still get there and shop when I can, but not involved in the management of the market anymore. One of the things that Hannah had asked me and Mandy to share was, why did the Chillicothe Farmers Market decide that the cooperative structure was right for us? And so back at that time when the market was getting re-energized in our town, we had a lot of support from the community, which was wonderful. But we are also a growers only vendor managed market. And we as vendors wanted the opportunity to make the decisions, guide the direction and the future of the farmers market. So we decided that the cooperative business structure was a fit for our market. That way our vendors could be in control of making decisions for the market. And so that worked really well for us at that particular time. The other thing I think that was really helpful for that was, when you form a cooperative, and Hannah, you're the legal expert, so if I misspeak, please correct me, but you can set who members of your organization can be. And so again, for us, it was, you had to be a vendor at the farmers market to be a member of the association. And then as such, you got voting rights. And one of the things, of course, the vote's not based on your number of shares. So we have vendors that have multiple spaces at the farmers market. Regardless, they still only get one vote. So one member, one vote, regardless, again, of their investment in that cooperative. And again, we had at that time also a lot of community support, a lot of support wanting us to move to the historic downtown area, which would have been wonderful, but there wasn't an adequate space for our market to be there, one that was big enough to allow us to grow and increase in the number of vendors, that provided enough parking for our vendors and our customers. Those of you that are involved in farmers markets recognize that having handicapped accessible parking can be very beneficial to your market. And so we've been very fortunate that the county commissioners have allowed us to use a large black-topped parking lot over these years on Saturday mornings, that they haven't charged us to use that. They've been very supportive, but it's a huge parking lot. It's at the county service center. So that's been really helpful. And again, by the market and vendors having control of where we were located, we were able to stay in a location that worked best for us at the time, instead of automatically limiting the market by moving to the historic downtown. We love downtown. There's just not a suitable spot at this point. So Mandy, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think it's really beneficial that we highlight community partners when we talk about not only farmers market, but the cooperative model. We have now, with the support of the Ross County Commissioners, we actually operate as a year-round outdoor farmers market. We used to just be seasonal from May to October, but starting in 2020, we moved to a year-round market, and it's been great to have the community support.
Again, our driving force on why a cooperative was who makes the decisions. The other thing, as you well know, if you're in the farmers market world, is you have vendors that come and go all the time. Some will come for a couple weeks and you won't see them anymore. Some will come for years and then for whatever reason they can't come back. And so to be able to have that annual membership renewal, we felt was really helpful for our market, again, to help us grow, to keep the continuity moving forward. And we also at that time had what we called daily vendors. So you could either sign up to be an annual member, which meant you were guaranteed space in the market on the weeks that you had product to sell. And at one point, we were up to 50 vendors every Saturday. We also then at that time had another level of membership, which is what we called our daily vendors. So they could pay to come one day. And one of the things that was nice about that was it allowed especially new entrepreneurs to come and get a feel for the farmers market, to let the customers at the market get a feel for them. And then they could decide whether they wanted to pursue that. And we had many vendors that started as daily vendors and then in the following season would sign up to be an annual member of the market as well. But again, because that come and goes, especially with a lot of the bakers, that just was really helpful for us. It was also a way that with the community support that we had and still have, it was a way to manage the message and to help the community understand that we as vendors care about our community. We were all wanting to work together, not only to help our individual businesses, but to help each other's businesses. And I think by being that cooperative and having that consistent message that we were able to share with our community, help them understand that, yeah, we're not just here just to make a buck. Yes, we have to make money to be sustainable, but we do care about our communities and we care about our other vendors. So we'd have times where in the market, like my product and Mandy's product and a couple other vendors, we'd put a recipe together that had all four of those vendors' products in and then pass those out at the market, which again said to our customers, we not only care about you, but we care about everybody that's a part of this market. And so again, that cooperative principles came into play. And then the other thing that I would say with the legal structure for the market was it's a way to help manage risk. And of course, we need to think about anytime we are doing business for benefit for ourselves or as the market, that can increase your risk level to some extent. And so it was a way to help manage some of the risk, not only for the individual vendors, but more so for the board of directors and the broader membership of the market. And one of the discussions we had early on a lot was we had insurance for the farmers market, but it covered the farmers market. It didn't cover individual vendors. And so that's a distinction that we had to make as well. But again, really helped us manage that risk. And so we went through the process of becoming a legally formed cooperative within the state of Ohio. And I think we have some folks from different states on today. Cooperative law varies from state to state. So just because it worked here in Ohio doesn't necessarily mean it will work in your state as well. But then we initially applied to the IRS to become, have nonprofit status, which initially, I don't know if you all remember, but there was a time when the IRS was like, we are not granting nonprofit status to farmers markets. That doesn't make sense. Well, we were able to get nonprofit status as a 501c6. which was like a business league or organization. And that again helped us managing our finances, but it did provide some limitations on going on after sponsorships and those. And so, Mandy, if you would want to take a minute and talk about the 501c3 status and how that's benefited the market, that'd be great.
Yes, it was mainly a goal to apply for the 501c3 status to be more competitive when it came from not only local and state, but also federal grants and sponsorships. When they saw that we were a legal structure and operating cooperatively, and you have all of these diverse businesses and vendors, it made us more competitive because they saw the economic impact we were having in a wide variety of businesses in our local county. Because the Chillicothe Farmers Market, we actually have vendors from 6 surrounding counties. So we are really strong in this Appalachian region, and working with the county, the city, our local health districts, our local regional medical centers, this all tied together to be under this nonprofit status.
And so again, when we talked about why the cooperative structure worked for the Chillicothe Farmers Market, you must be a vendor. I mean, that was first and foremost. Now, I know across the country there are organizations, whether they're cooperative or not, but that are board managed, and they'll have different types of board positions. They might have a community member, they might have a customer, they might have an extension educator or some other governmental type person on their board. And so I think it's important to think about, if you're thinking about starting as a cooperative, who's your board and what's the makeup of that board, and why do you think that might work for your particular situation? The other thing, again, that was helpful for us was that annual membership renewal. And as you guys are aware, farmers markets are not big money generators. We started out, the last I remember, Mandy, you'd have to correct me what it is now, but an annual membership was $125 and a daily vendor fee was $20. So very reasonable and not really a money generator for the market itself. And then the board of directors was elected at our annual meeting. So there is an annual meeting that's had every year, and that's where decisions are voted on for the cooperative. And again, the main reason at the time that we formed the cooperative, it was to maintain control of that organization. I think, again, with the community support, it was just a way to say, yes, we love our community, we're glad you're here, but we want to make the decisions. So anything you want to add there, Mandy?
So our membership dues have increased. We're now at $475 for a 6-month season, but that allowed, not only your voting rights as a member, but we did add an online ordering system. So vendors have the option to accept pre-orders. And that's really beneficial because, as we all know, you can plan a harvest or plan to bake something, and then the weather's less than cooperative and you have all of this waste. So we have found like the online ordering system is helping vendors plan accordingly and be efficient in making as much money as they can at our farmers markets. And then also, when we were talking about the board of directors being elected by, and you having to be members of and vendors at our farmers market, we allowed the formation of committees. And that helped us engage other community leaders that were working closely with the board and the association without being actual vendors or members of the board. So committees have been something we've added in the last 3 years. And that's really helped us with not only grants, but getting donations and sponsorships from other organizations within our community.
Mandy, I was wondering if we could take this opportunity for you to talk just a little bit about the board makeup. How many folks and what's that process like, et cetera.
Okay, so currently we have 6 members. We don't have a limit per se on the amount of board members we can have, but we operate under a president, vice president, treasurer. secretary, and then we added 2 member-at-large positions, and that's been in the last 3 years. And 1 member-at-large is solely responsible for the sponsorship and donation committee aspect of the farmers market, and then the other member-at-large goes to, trainings and just make sure our farmers market is compliant, up to date with the Ohio Department of Agriculture rules, food safety, GAP training, anything for any of our organizations, especially with value added products that always seem, the rules are constantly changing on what's permitted. So that is the board structure that we utilize. And something that's newer to us is when I became market manager 2 years ago, they actually have me serving on the board as well. Historically, our market manager was not part of regular board meetings unless they were invited or asked to present something to the board of a serious nature. But we find it has been extremely beneficial for me to be able to communicate with vendors and then be directly on the board. And these are the people that are presenting rule changes, bylaws, vendor applications to our membership for vote. So we all feel like we have a solid communication chain with this structure.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
And so again, as I mentioned, oh, I'm hearing thunder all of a sudden. Cool, maybe we'll get a little bit of rain. Again, you can have different types of memberships. I know that there are some farmers markets across the country that have a Friends of Market. And so they love to support the market. They can make a donation or pay an annual fee, and then maybe they get first notice of when the sweet corn's going to be ready, or those kinds of things, or something different that the market is doing. I do think, again, and I hope that Mandy, you will share more about the sponsorships and the grant funding. And then, as I mentioned, our daily vendors at that time, $20 a day, which was, really nothing if you're trying to start a new business and test out your product. And so if there are questions about that, I'm happy to answer those. Mandy, whatever else that you'd like to share on that would be helpful, I'm sure.
So our sponsorships have taken on the form of different tiers, which is kind of like the friend of the market and other structures I've seen at farmers markets where, for example, if you sponsor the market for $100 for the 6-month season, that gets you a weekly social media mention of your business, or if it's an individual, and then we put their logo, we do a weekly email newsletter to let folks know, hey, here are the vendors that are going to be present. This is some upcoming market events, music, different things that we're doing. So different tiers, you get different perks. And, of course, like the more money you get a bigger logo on our sign at the entrance of the farmers market by the road. And then as far as grant funding, we work closely with the city of Chillicothe, also our Ross County Health District, and our regional Adena Medical Center. Several of them have applied for grants on behalf of the farmers market and then share the monetary value in kind donations with the farmers market. For example, Adena Regional Medical Center does a Healthy RX prescription voucher where they will reimburse us for vouchers we receive from patients that were given these healthy eating from dietitians for cardiac health, diabetes, and they get incentives for $15 to spend at our farmers market on fresh fruits and vegetables for healthier eating. We also work with the Ross County Health District actually paid for our entire annual subscription for our online ordering system with the confidence that it allows EBT and Ohio SNAP recipients to be able to utilize their card for fresh fruits and vegetables. So again, healthier eating, community health, and these are all goals that we're working together to help.
Mandy mentioned accepting SNAP benefits. And again, for those of you that are familiar with the industry, when you apply to become SNAP authorized for a farmer's market, it used to be back in the day that an individual had to give their Social Security number as the responsible party. Finally, that has been updated, but you must provide an employer identification number for a responsible party as part of that application process. And so once you become legally organized, for example, as a cooperative, then you can apply to the IRS to get your employer identification number. It's no charge. Don't pay somebody to get that for you. There's scams out there. You can go right on the IRS's website and say, I need an EIN number. And there's a form that you fill out, and they'll send you a letter detailing what that might be. The other reason that you need to have that for a market wanting to accept SNAP, and just like EBT, electronic benefits transfer mentions, the funds are all electronically transferred. They don't cut you a check or give you cash. It goes from the government bank into your bank account. And so you need to have that separate checking account or bank account. And usually banks require that you're legally organized to be able to set up a business checking account as well. And then the other thing is about keeping track of the funds. And so one of the things that markets need to do is not only account for the number of transactions that are made at the market every market day, then they also need to know how many of those tokens or script, whatever it is you use, get actually used that day of the market. And maybe you have customers that bought $20 worth of SNAP tokens, but they only used $14. So those 6 tokens that are kind of floating out there, you have to be able to keep track of that as well, because that's not the market's money. That's still the customer's money. They just haven't spent that token or those funds at the market yet. And so if you have questions about accepting SNAP at farmers markets, I do have a link to a fact sheet that we did that's available at Ohio Line. And that's pretty standard across the country. It's not really state specific because it's a federal program. And so one last thing that I want to say, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mandy. I think it's very important too that you think about what's the mission of your farmers market. And as we talk about the Chillicothe Farmers Market, and you see the logo here, which a local graphic designer did for us at no cost, but you can see it's growing community. And so it's not all about us as vendors. It's really that we care about and want to be part of our communities. And then again, that's a win-win. You know, that helps us as farmers, that helps customers get access to healthy foods, and that helps the community. You know, there's really not another place that I can think of where such a diversity of shoppers can come together and interact and just feel welcomed, educated, and have that just atmosphere that's hard to put a term to as far as farmers markets go. And so the only other thing I would say about the market and the mission statement, it is important to have a mission statement for your market so that that can help direct you when you're making decisions. We can't be everything to everyone. And so having that mission statement can really help when it comes to making decisions for the organization, especially over time. As people come and go, different vendors come and go, different board members come and go, it can still help to guide the direction of the organization. And with that, I am going to quit talking and turn it over to Mandy and let her share more about the Chillicothe Farmers Market.
Thank you, Christie. So as Christie was kind of highlighting that sense of community, we can't highlight that enough. And it was one thing that really hurt a lot of farmers markets, including the Chillicothe Farmers Market during COVID. Here we were telling folks, you can't gather, you can't socialize. And that is really what our farmers market was. It was amazing how many people would literally come for 5-10 minutes, get the items that they wanted, and then they just want to stand in the middle in their groups and families and talk about their weeks. And we had to say you couldn't do that. But the farmers market was resilient. And Hannah and I were talking briefly before the webinar today started. A farmer's market still is a business, and it has to be treated as such. So when you make these rules and regulations, as market manager, I'm not always the popular person at the farmer's market because we have rules that the membership of our organization and association have voted upon. So we can't just apply that to one or two. It has to be universal without favoritism, because we all are equal members in the success of this organization. Today, the farmers market only has 28 vendors. But again, as I said earlier, we come from 6 surrounding counties to the Ross County area. And we average just over about $400,000 in a summer season. So a larger economic impact for only having 28 vendors, and something we're very proud of. Christie also mentioned earlier, I won't say it's a unique structure anymore, but one that we're very proud of is that we are a growers market. So if you have a product on your table, we do farm tours and farm inspections, and it's just to keep people honest. We have a lot of wholesale locations in the area, from produce auctions, grocery distribution centers, and we want to make sure that what people are baking, selling, growing is actually their product. So we just keep that in mind, that as a cooperative model, the members, we answer to them as the board, but they also answer to the cooperative structure, as well as following the rules, the mission statement, and the bylaws that we established as the organization. And something else we were talking about as a cooperative is engaging farmers. We all know that it probably took some of us a lot to organize this day to take out with the dry weather and needing to do this and that around our farms and businesses. So being busy, it is a factor, and we have lost vendors for the fact that they're just, hey, that I got my feet on the ground at the farmers market, I made my networks, I made some connections, and now I'm wholesaling to this restaurant, or I am a distributor for this big box store up in Columbus. And it's okay to lose vendors sometimes for that. We're okay being the stepping stone for you to become your own successful business. But farmers markets are that great networking. That's how I met Hannah and Christie, is as a farmer myself, and then also as a vendor with the Chillicothe Farmers Market, through workshops and webinars to learn how, not only how to market my product, but how to be successful in getting my product elsewhere, not just at my own market or a farmer's market. So I welcome if anybody has specific questions about the farmers market or our cooperative structure.
First of all, I want to say thank you to both of you for sharing. That was a fantastic overview. Lots of really great information in there. And we do have plenty of time for questions for Mandy and or Christie. I do just want to mention, before we jump into questions, there are a couple of resources. I mean, there's more than a couple, but I'm going to highlight a couple here. Of course, we released an article recently, just a short blog article about the cooperative model specifically for farmers markets, and some things that both Mandy and Christie have touched on that offers a little bit more information there. And then I want to point out that many of the pieces that Christie and Mandy were talking about can get somewhat complex, right? Accepting SNAP benefits, right? Working through bylaws and what that means for an annual meeting, and all of those pieces. The Farmers Market Legal Toolkit from the Center for Agriculture and Food Systems at Vermont Law School is an excellent resource. Kudos to the folks at Vermont that put that together. It's a really great resource. So I just wanted to point that out, that it is out there. It covers all different kinds of business entities for farmers markets. It does have a section on accepting federal nutrition benefits. It's an online resource. I think there's also a PDF version or some kind of format like that that's accessible as well. So I just wanted to point that out as a resource. And Christie and Mandy, if there are others, please feel free to add those here. And then I'll jump into Q&A if there are not others. Christie, I know you know of a ton. So please throw those out there too.
Well, of course, one thing I have to mention is Farmers Market Coalition, who worked with Vermont to put that legal toolkit for farmers markets together. And so they're a great resource as well. And just to get on everybody's calendar, National Farmers Market Week is coming up. It's the first full week of August. I forget the exact dates. But Farmers Market Coalition has also put together a toolkit to help you promote National Farmers Market Week. You can download it for free from farmersmarketcoalition.org. There's proclamations. You can work with your policymakers, governor, whoever that might be, to get the proclamations out, as well as a bunch of resources for social media promotions and those kinds of things. And then the other thing that I want to say as well is when we think about the cooperative structure, it is also how our state association of farmers markets is formed. They are a cooperative of both market managers and vendors here in Ohio. And so that's another organization you can look to if you have questions about how the cooperative business structure has worked for them as well.
Yeah, Christy, thank you for that reminder. That's an excellent reminder. There are, as I said, if you've seen one co-op, you've seen one co-op. Everyone is a little bit different because it responds to its community of members. And so I'm sure there are other examples. If you know of examples, feel free to add those in the chat if you'd like to share those with folks. So I'm going to kick off with some Q&A, and I welcome anybody who would like to ask Christy or Mandy a question. Feel free to add that in the chat, or feel free to use the raise hand function, and we will invite you to come off of mute and ask your question directly. So we talked, Christy, you talked in the beginning when the group was considering forming a cooperative, and Mandy, you've talked about this as even a current challenge, but I'm wondering if you can maybe spend a little bit of time thinking with us about how the cooperative structure helps with engagement of busy farmers and vendors, and maybe also how that structure might hinder some of that as well, right? We think cooperatives are pretty cool, but we also know that they come with challenges. So either one. And Mandy, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I won't say that it's unique to cooperatives, but the more people you deal with, the more challenges there can be, because answering to membership, we have to answer to what the membership wants. So that's why the annual meeting is the most important thing for our market, but we only usually get a third of our vendors and members actually attend the annual meeting. So one of the challenges to that is if the quorum there adopts a rule or a bylaw and the folks that weren't present don't like it, we get to say, well, we had a 2-month, notice that we had an annual meeting and you should have been there. So a challenge for a membership run organization is just that. It depends on the views and the goals of the members. But again, we always bring our bylaws, our mission statement to make sure any of those rules and bylaws support why we're there. And that is to support community health and support the vendors to be successful in that mission.
That's a great point, Mandy. And I just want to say that a third of your membership is actually really great for an annual meeting based on some of the data we're seeing from survey. There's a really great piece of governance research out there on cooperative governance from the University of Wisconsin, looking at things like that. It's not necessarily generalizable for the statistics nerds out there, not necessarily statistically generalizable, but sharing with us that the cooperatives that responded are reporting anywhere from just a very wide range of participation at annual meetings. And for producer cooperatives, not uncommon for that range to be around that 20% on average. So you're doing really great. Good job. Yeah.
Well,
Christie?
and I'd like to just add, Hannah, that again, early on when we formed as a cooperative, there was a lot of discussion about what could be sold at the market. As Mandy mentioned, we have several produce auctions within, the counties that surround Ross County. And so there was a good deal of discussion about what could be sold. At that time also, there were a lot of craft shows that were happening around, and were we going to allow those kind of things to come in or not? By having the legally structured cooperative and our set of bylaws, which really deal with how to manage the cooperative and, how the decision process works. Then we also developed the rules for the market. And so as Mandy mentioned, sometimes you need to change those.
Yeah.
When we first started years ago with that many produce auctions around, we were not necessarily a grower only market. If you wanted to sell something you got at the local produce auction, it had to be less than 50% of what you were selling. And you had to put a sign that said, I didn't grow this. It came from the produce auction. And so over time, that has changed. And so that's when, again, you can get your members involved to say, let's look at the rules. Do we need to make
Yeah.
some updates? So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah, 2 years ago is when the membership, it was during our just COVID years, and members stood up and just said, no, you know what? I don't think 50% is fair. They upped it to 75% of your product must be grown on your farm. And the only way we can supplement is if it's Ohio grown, or if you have a crop failure due to an act of God, weather, whatever, then they can purchase to supplement so that they don't go out of business, because we want them to be successful. But yes, we are very stringent on the farm inspections, especially for our produce vendors. And unfortunately, we have had to remove vendors when we went to the property and none of the product, there was nothing on their property as far as produce. So it is very important, as we kind of discussed, the rules are the rules and they have to apply to every member.
Yeah, and sometimes some of that stuff is less fun to think about, right? But it is something that, as we're thinking about how to operate as a successful business in the long term, those are some of the things that market managers and the folks who are organizing a market come across. We have a couple of questions that I want to jump to in the chat. So Thomas is asking, what are some ways you were able to communicate to vendors at the beginning of the process about what a cooperative is and how cooperatives operate, or what the benefits of a cooperative might be? And Thomas, this is a question near and dear to my heart. And so I'll ask Christie and Mandy to share their perspective. Mandy, do you want to go first, and then we'll jump to Christie?
Sure. A lot of the vendor applicants we get come directly to the farmers market and will speak to us in person. So that's really beneficial to be able to walk them around, show them the vendors, and talk about our membership structure. But a lot of the time we just get the applications in the mail generically. And it's one of those things, if they are accepted, then we kind of have the deeper conversation. We don't have a pamphlet or like a flyer, and it's something that is in our advertising budget this year to really talk about the structure and the benefits. Because as Christie mentioned, we do have a daily vendor option, and it's $25. And as Christie mentioned, when you're starting up for the first time, it's really costs are costs, and everything's expensive to get started. So we tried to keep it minimal, but we also push that at the same time, you can buy a full membership and you're only at $16 a day and all these added extra benefits. So they start seeing, okay, actually it's cheaper for me to kind of just go all in and commit for the entire season.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mandy. And the other thing I'll say, Thomas, when we, again, were looking at the cooperative structure, we've been fortunate that we've had the Cooperative Development Center here at South Centers for a number of years. So we really leaned on them to help educate our potential vendors at that time. And we had a steering committee, and it was a lot of discussion, again, I think, about the decision-making process and who can make the decisions at that time. Again, it was really, again, the community was very supportive, but we didn't want them coming in and say, this is how it's going to be, and our vendors not have any say in how that worked. And so I think at the original formation, it was just, let's do this so that we can make the decisions for the market that we see fit. And again, we're fortunate to have the Cooperative Development Center to provide some of that education.
And that is something, Thomas, and anybody on the call who's familiar with cooperatives, the structure can be complex, and it can be a little bit overwhelming or potentially intimidating for folks. And so if you have resources out there that you think are really useful, or just folks who are able to communicate some of that in an easier to understand manner, that can be really helpful, I think. Even just doing things like this today, this is part of why we're doing this today, is to peel back some of that complexity and say, well, what does this actually look like? So hopefully this is helpful. Annie has asked a really great question in the chat. Any words of wisdom or caution for cooperative membership when participants or vendors in this case are residents in more than one state? So for example, if this is something we deal with in Southern Ohio a lot because we're in kind of border communities as well. I'm not sure so much with Chillicothe Market if you have that much experience here, but maybe I'll ask Christie to share.
I would say it's more becomes an issue with the food safety regulations and what you can sell in this state opposed to that state. I would think, again, if you're on a state line and you're vending in both of those states, again, it's the cooperative that decides the what's and how's at a particular market. And so I can't see that being on a state line necessarily would be an issue for the cooperative itself.
Because I know just having vendors from multiple counties has been a challenge in some regards, because one health department says, okay, you can sell meat out of a cooler with ice packs because your market's less than 4 hours. And we have a neighboring county that says, absolutely not. You must have a generator and mechanical refrigeration, the entire market. So I know that there's probably challenges, but as Christie highlighted, if your cooperative says this is how it's governed, as long as they're following the food safety aspects or cottage food laws for that state, I would imagine that your farmers market would honor those as long as the rules and laws are being followed.
I do want to share a couple of points too, just a point of clarification. If a cooperative is legally structured as its own entity, generally speaking, there is a separation between the cooperative and the members. So of course, members are owners of the cooperative, but the cooperative doesn't subsume the business of its members. Sometimes that's something that I think can cause some confusion for folks when they're first learning about cooperatives, is they think that their identity and enterprise and farm is going to get rolled up into this other thing that is a cooperative. And that's not the case, generally speaking. So I want to, it looks like Annie maybe has raised hand to maybe clarify or add something to that question. So Annie, I'll invite you to share.
Thank you so much. The reason specifically that I ask is because there is actually a really beautiful cooperative grocery store on the Virginia side of the state line, right near where we live. And our market and myself are located on the West Virginia side. And I cannot, in a consumer cooperative, right? It's where it's I cannot become a member of that Virginia cooperative. So that's why I asked, because I don't know how that has to do with their bylaws versus the way that cooperative registration works.
Interesting. That's a really interesting question. Sometimes it can depend on the cooperative specifically, Annie. The cooperative can set up, for example, generally speaking, can set up who qualifies for membership and what their membership looks like. But if you want to have a conversation a little bit deeper about what some of those nuances are, we're happy to do that. Thanks for asking the question. Really good question. Katie was asking in the chat, how does Chillicothe Farmers Market Association handle value-added vendors, for example, cheese vendors or bakers, for membership? Could you clarify, Mandy, what that membership is and what maybe the types of membership you have are?
So if you're a member, you're a member. We don't classify as far as only this type or only this type of vendor. I will say what we look at is diversification of product, which we do believe choice is power and you want to have a full market. But we also realize that oversaturation in certain categories is not going to help anyone. So we tend to look, right now we're at 28 vendors and the majority of them are bakers. And trust me, I think my grandmother makes the best banana cream pie, and you're going to get someone who says, well, I make the best cookies. So, but we still have to look at the health and the integrity of the entire market. So we tend to say, okay, if we have 28 vendors, we would like half of it to be, you know, fresh produce or homegrown plants or herbs, and then maybe, you know, a third of that can be bakers, and then we have another third that is your meat vendors. So we try to diversify, but we treat all members regardless of what you sell. They're all full membership voting rights as long as they are not daily vendors. If you are a daily vendor, you don't get voting rights.
That is helpful. Thank you. Okay.
Hannah, if I could, I just wanted
Sure,
to go
please.
back to Annie's question there for a minute as well. The one thing I think it's important to think about for the Chillicothe Farmers Market Association, we don't sell produce. We don't sell product. We don't take Mandy's product and sell that to consumers. What the Chillicothe Farmers Market does is market the farmers market for the vendors that are members, make those connections, develop those relationships. So they manage, but at no time do they ever take ownership of anybody's product to then sell it directly to consumers. That's all on the vendors. And I wanted to make that distinction from a consumer co-op to what the market does.
Thank you, Christy, because that's very important. As humans, we'll have vendors that get upset if they don't feel like they're being as successful as they can. And we always will tell them, did you advertise you were here today? Did you do your social media posts? Because the market did, but as a member, you're, you know, responsible for your success as well. We're here to help you, but we all have to take individuality and, you know, be responsible for our own success. So thank you for mentioning that, Christy.
Really, really good point, right? That the market itself as the cooperative, a lot of times we can think about cooperatives, we do think about cooperatives based on the function they serve, right? Are they a marketing cooperative? Do they help people purchase better, right? Or we might think about those cooperatives based on who's a member, for example, a producer cooperative like the Chillicothe Farmers Market Association, or a consumer cooperative. Very common examples of consumer cooperatives are consumer-owned grocery stores or customer-owned banking institutions like credit unions, and rural electric cooperatives are examples of consumer cooperatives. And so you're right that it's really important, and I'm going to go back to the initial slide that I shared, that members, generally they are users of the enterprise. And so the vendors at the Chillicothe Farmers Market Association are utilizing the marketing of the association, of the cooperative, right? That is its primary benefit to the vendors, is that marketing and outreach and building opportunities for sales, developing relationships in the community. And of course, I'm not suggesting that's the only thing that the market association does, but of course, that's one of the major things. And so if you're thinking about a cooperative, whether it's a farmers market cooperative or any kind, it's really important to understand and kind of articulate, well, here's the relationship we have with our vendors and how the cooperative is going to help those folks. Here's how we're going to interact with the members of our cooperative. Really great points. We could talk about cooperatives all day. I would love to, but we've got to let Mandy get back to it. Hopefully it's raining on her and she might get a little bit more of a break.
It's thundering, so hopefully soon.
Yeah, hopefully soon. And we need to let all of you get back to your day, but we really thank you so much for your time. I do just want to share again, these resources are here. Please feel free. We, of course, recorded today. We are happy to help you think about any of these considerations for working cooperatively, if that's something that interests you, from thinking about, well, who would be engaged and what is their role? Mandy talked about that. How will a group make decisions? Christy mentioning that that was one of the core pieces of the motivation for this group organizing as a cooperative. Will the group be formally organized? If they will, what does that look like? Of course, that's often done in coordination with business advisors and professionals. How can the group manage risk? There is, as Christy said, risk with any business operation. What does it look like for the group to manage that risk? And this is maybe one of my favorites. Is it feasible that working together will actually do what it is you're hoping that working together will do, right? There's hopefully a reason that you're interested in working together. Whether that reason is actually feasible for gaining that benefit might be a different question. And that's okay if the answer is no, but sometimes it's worth exploring what the answer to that is. So we're happy to help folks think about these questions and to share some other examples. We invite you to share your feedback for today's conversation. It's very helpful to us when you do share your feedback. We definitely take it into consideration. It helps us improve future learning sessions. I do want to say that this feedback is going to ask you a little bit about yourself. All of that information that you share is totally voluntary. Please don't feel obligated to answer those questions, but we appreciate your feedback in reporting who we reach and how. With that, I am going to share contact information one more time. You should receive a invitation to complete our feedback survey again when you log out of Zoom. But I will put that back up one more time too, and say big thank you again to Christie and Mandy, and also amazing work. Thanks for doing the work that you're doing, and best of luck as you continue. Thanks so much.